Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to another bonus new album spotlight that I'm doing this week. Usually I try to just do one of these a week, but there was another album that really struck me that I wanted to make sure I covered. And I know there's a pretty busy schedule ahead for new albums coming out, so I felt like if I didn't talk about it now, it would probably get lost and I wouldn't be able to talk about it till much later in the year. But this is the album Hymns for Hungry Spirits Volume 2 by Great Wide Nothing. This is a band I wasn't too familiar with until this album. And of course it's a Volume 2, so there's a Volume 1 to check out as well that is apparently the first part of this almost two-parter project here. But this is the main album that I was listening to that just came out recently. And it's a really fascinating listen. This is a US-based band coming from Atlanta, founded by Daniel Graham, Dylan Porper, and Jeff Matthews. They're inspired by the progressive scene of the 70s, but I believe they bring in a more punk, indie rock aesthetic to this progressive rock influence from the 70s, which really creates a fascinating blend of music. Decidedly more modern approach to their music that really sets it apart from a lot of their other contemporaries in the prog scene who tend to be more retro and looking backwards to an older style. They bring some influences from that older style but bring it into a new era and bring in a lot of different influences that you don't always hear in progressive rock. And I think a lot of that is baked into the spirit of this album. There's just intensity and ferocity about it that it comes out of the gates really hitting hard and doing things in a more aggressive style than you might be used to with your typical symphonic neo-prog type of music. Blind Eye to a Burning House really starts off with a burst of energy, some energetic keys and powerful drums, a catchy chorus as the song moves along at a quick pace, almost an 80s synth rock vibe, but a bit theatrical and over the top here. A great way to open the album with a lot of energy and excitement. I find it interesting that this band seems to focus more on the keyboard as a central sound for the album, not as much guitars to be heard. There's some guitars sprinkled throughout, especially in later tracks, but they seem to really give a lot of emphasis to keyboards, to synths, and that seems to be their primary thought. The other interesting thing about the group is the singer, who I think has an unconventional style compared to most other progressive rock singers. A more punk, indie, modern approach, in my eyes, has a very unique sound that at first was a bit jarring for me, just something I wasn't expecting to fit with this style of music, but it actually works and actually fit after I listened to this a few extra times and made for an interesting, unique element to it that I think brings an even better aesthetic to the album and makes it stand out a bit more than some of the other generic music in this style. The album continues with The Portal and The Precipice. Get some heavier keyboards, almost giving a Deep Purple sort of vibe, kind of a shorter rocker with a great keyboard solo at the end, once again keeping that energy up and high throughout the album. Viper is one of my favorites. A thundering beat with great keyboard work begins the piece as it morphs into more of a stomping classic rock type feel with distorted vocals, showing some anger and ferocity in the lyrics, but then that's balanced by a lighter, more power ballad style chorus later on, and a great synth solo once again. Lots of synths all throughout this album, almost gives it an 80s style vibe, especially on Inheritor, which is almost like a big 80s power ballad sound with some 80s style guitars, really uplifting guitar solo at the end. Like I said, I didn't feel like guitars were featured much throughout the album to this point. It was more about those synths and those keyboard lines and that rumbling bass and those thundering drums, but here we get a bit more of that guitar in the mix, which adds another layer to their sound. I really thought this was a good piece. And then it all culminates in the big epic of the album, To Find the Light Part 2, which apparently is second part to the first, which is on their Volume 1 album, beginning with a haunting piano melody, then you get some pounding drums and expressive synth with some strumming acoustic guitar, a great atmosphere, a great way to open the epic. The energy then gets cranked up to 11 with a big wall of sound of keyboards before some chugging guitar enters in with the vocal section. More uplifting and epic moments throughout this piece as it continues forward. It's a really well-constructed epic that doesn't ever outstay its welcome, doesn't sound like it's just repeating itself. It moves along, feels interconnected, but at the same time has a lot of variety involved as well. So it really creates that perfect balance, because sometimes epics can either feel a bit disjointed or they can feel overly long without much purpose to them, or they're just being repetitive and not really doing anything new to justify the length of the piece. But here I think they strike just that perfect right balance where it's just as long as it needs to be. There's enough variety to keep you interested and entertained, but it doesn't just feel like a bunch of disparate strung together elements that don't work together. So just the perfect balance of stuff. Some great midsection instrumental work going on here, some incredible synth soloing. There's a great jazzy vibe through part of this with some jazzy keyboard sounds, and once again a big epic grand conclusion with a soaring ending, giving a very satisfying finale to this really satisfying listen. It's a short album, it's like 40 minutes long. The first 4 tracks are all fairly short for prog, and then you get the one epic at the end. It's a really good balance, and I found it to be really a fun listen. A lot of energy, it has this punk type of spirit to it, even though it's rooted in more of a 70s symphonic prog style, and I think it's a fascinating combination of music that really produced an incredible album. So really high on this album. The more I listen to it, the more fun I'm having with it, and I really recommend it to all of you out there who enjoy the same type of music that I like. So please check it out, support the artists, and check it out on their Bandcamp or wherever they're selling their album. I would really recommend it. So thank you guys for watching this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed this recommendation, and let me know in the comments if this is one you've heard, how you feel about the album, and perhaps how you felt about their previous albums, which I have yet to check out. So thank you guys so much for all your support and for all that you do for the channel. And for now, enjoy the music, and I'll hopefully catch you in a future episode. Bye everybody!